Hey, this is Kyle with KyleSeagraves.com. Today we're going to talk about 8 advantages of using a debit card. So we all want to make sure that we're using our money wisely, especially because we see so many offers thrown at us for different credit cards and debit cards and banks and accounts and all the interest that they pay and perks that they give. It's hard to decide which one to use. So we're going to talk about debit cards and why they have some pretty strong advantages that you might want to stack up compared to everything else that's being thrown at you. So we can add some clarity to the fog. All right. Number one, the first advantage of debit cards is no debt, right? If you have a credit card, you're carrying debt. Whether you're going to pay that off or not, it's still going to be a little bit of debt that's hanging there in the balance. With debit cards, it's coming straight from your account. So it functions like cash, but you have it on a little debit card instead. Number two is it's a lot easier to budget with a debit card than it is to budget with a credit card, cash, or a checkbook. The hardest of those three, I think, is cash. Cash is so hard to track, not only because I always fumble with all of the coins that I have and they end up sitting in like the cup holder in my car and then they fall out and it's impossible to figure out where that change is going. And also it's just too easy to forget where cash is at, whether I have it in my pocket or I wash my clothes later and I find a 20. Cash is just difficult to track, whether by yourself or with another person. Then you have a checkbook is, I think, difficult as well because you're always reconciling accounts to figure out where money is at actively at one time. And then with a credit card, you're also struggling with pending transactions and if any interest is being accrued and what your monthly payment is if you're not paying it off. So having a debit card is going to be the best way to make sure that you stay on a budget and stay on track with your spending, because as soon as you swipe that card, you're immediately going to see a notification. Hopefully you have like an app for your bank that's going to show you your active balance. So a debit card makes it really easy to see how much money you have and how much you're spending at a time. Number three, the advantage of a debit card is convenience without temptation, right? So a debit card is a great way to have the convenience of not having to worry about counting out cash or having the correct amount on you, or not having to write a checkbook, but it gives you that convenience without having the temptation of going into debt. For instance, a credit card is incredibly convenient, but it can be really tempting because it can be pretty easy to just swipe and on a credit card and pay for something even if you don't have that money in your account. When you have a debit card, that money's directly in your account, meaning it's going to come straight out if you swipe that card. So it gives you a little bit more hesitation to not want to overspend. So it gives you that convenience of not carrying around cash and fumbling with it like I do, not having a checkbook and having to write that and carry it around, and not having the temptation that a credit card sometimes can have. Number four, it's super easy with a debit card to stay on track with your account with another person, right? So whether it's a spouse or a partner, if you have a joint account, a debit card is a great way to make sure that you're able to see all the transactions that are happening and how much money is available right now. How much money do you have available in your account? When you're dealing with credit cards or checkbooks or cash, it's difficult to figure out where all that money is. If money is in different places and it's being spent with leverage, or maybe it's being spent with a delay like in a check, it's hard to figure out exactly where that money is, especially if you're keeping a tight budget and wanting to make sure that your expenses don't go astray. So a debit card really helps you stay on the same track because all of those numbers are immediate and it's with true cash value instead of leverage like a credit card or delayed like a checkbook. Number five is debit cards usually have no fees, right? If you're running, checkbooks sometimes cost money. Credit cards usually have annual fees or interest that you're paying. With a debit cards, you're usually not experiencing any fees at all, which is incredible, meaning, you can keep that money in there. It might gain some interest depending on the type of checking or savings account you have. And you know that you can spend that money without any cost. Sometimes you might hit things like overdraft fees or ATM fees, and those are things to look out for with your debit card. But most of the time, you're going to run into zero fee. Maybe your bank might have a minimum balance, but that's not going to be a fee to you. So that's one of the biggest advantages of debit cards. Number six is they are so easy to get. It is so easy to go to a bank, open an account. There might be a minimum balance, and usually it's pretty low. If anything, it might be like 25 bucks. Sometimes I have a credit union that's like a $5 minimum. So you might have a minimum to open the account, but then you can get a debit card to be able to spend your money freely with. So even if you get cash at your job, or you just get a check and you need to deposit it, it's going to be a great way to take those funds, put them somewhere secure, put them somewhere trackable. That way you can use your debit card to be able to go out and spend that money. Number 7 is having a debit card is a great way to potentially gain interest on the money that you have in your bank account, depending on who you bank with. So this isn't necessarily an advantage of the debit card itself, but an advantage of the institution that gives you the debit card. So for instance, I use an online bank called Simple, and it's backed by BBVA Compass. And so basically what they do is they give me a checking and a savings account. The checking account pays me like 0 interest, but the savings account pays me 2.02% interest. So what's great is when I know I can use my debit card and have all that money that's sitting in there is gaining interest. Now, 2% isn't anything crazy. It's comparable to probably a lower performing CD. But in my mind, I like to have that interest on my liquid cash readily available to protect against inflation, right? Because inflation on average is growing around 2 to 3% per year. So I know that my money is sitting there growing along with inflation, meaning that it's going to retain its purchase power over a period of time. Instead, if you don't have your money gaining interest at all, it has the potential of regressing 2% each year, compounding. So that's why I like having, that money in a debit card and readily available in my savings account. That way it can gain some interest and protect from inflation in the future. And finally, number 8 is it's a lot safer than cash or a checkbook, right? It's super easy for someone to, one for you to lose cash or for someone to take it, or same with a checkbook. If someone takes a checkbook, they have access readily available. And, with cash, it's difficult to track if somebody actually takes that, and you can't really dispute the fact if someone's stealing cash. There's not really recourse because nobody can track who stole it and where it was spent. With a debit card, number 1, the main security feature that you have if somebody stole it, whether they stole it online or they stole it physically, is usually you can hop on an app and freeze your card. So that's great right off the bat. If you know your card is lost, you just lock it down so it can't be swiped anywhere. Also, it's really easy to call your bank and say, hey, my card was stolen, or hey, I saw these fraudulent accounts. They now have a record of where that was spent, and they can digitally trace that back to see if that was a fraudulent account and see if they can help you reverse that and help you be secure online and in person. Whereas with checks and cash, you can't really do that. So I hope this gives you a good summary of the advantages of debit cards. Especially if you're on a budget, debit cards are going to be fantastic for you to stay on that budget, to make sure that you're secure with your money, and ultimately you're spending based on what you want to spend and not being taken advantage of a bunch of different offers from credit cards and all these other strange banks that want to throw some interesting offers your way, which usually turn out to be, ways that we can lose money or just make bad financial decisions. So if you have any questions on debit cards or money in general or mortgages, let me know in the comments. I'd love to help you out. Thanks so much for watching.